Today I'm going to have a chat about culture. The subject is huge, so I'm just going to touch on some elements of culture, specifically within our own, the realms of our own business. How culture might affect us during the course of our work and within our own organisations. I'll talk about culture, I'll talk about values, and we'll touch on behaviours at the end. So, interestingly, some symbols within cultures can mean some different things. In my world, this symbol means everything's okay or good. Some people have suggested it's a rabbit. In actual fact, in another culture, this symbol is a symbol of a far-right political movement. You may recall the atrocities in Christchurch recently, where the guy who committed these atrocities made this symbol when he was at court. So that led me to look a little bit at some more signs or hand signals. We'll all be familiar with this one. That way around it means peace. The other way around it means something completely different. This was an interesting one. In Italy that might mean, what is this? In Egypt that actually means, I'll be there in a minute. So when I was looking through the definitions of culture, I came across this poster initially, and that's what led me to look at the hand signals. So at first glance, this poster might tell you that culture is something that unites people, but when you look at the hand signals, there's lots of different cultural implications there. So what's the dictionary definition of culture? The Cambridge Dictionary tells us that culture is the way of life, especially the general customs and beliefs of a particular group of people at a particular time. Note at a particular time, because it's generally acknowledged that cultures can change over time, and just bear that in mind as we continue with the presentation. Here's another definition. Culture is the collective programming of the mind, which distinguishes one human group over another. Now, this definition comes from a guy called Geert Hofstede. Geert Hofstede is a world-renowned social psychologist. He's in the University of Maastricht. He may not be there now, he's about 90 years old. Mr. Hofstede did some what was considered groundbreaking research during the 70s, using information collated from 76 different countries. He also used and contributed to information from what's called the World Values Surveys. These surveys are currently ongoing and have been for several decades. In fact, the current survey is ongoing at the moment, and the results of that will be out in 2020. Now, Mr. Hofstede came up with his 6 dimensions of culture. Initially in the 70s, he had 5 dimensions, but this research has been ongoing for several decades, so now we have 6. Each of these dimensions has lots and lots of information around it. If you're interested in this, I suggest you go and have a look online. There's nice little videos on each of the headings there. Essentially what Mr. Hofstede did, he took each of these headings, he applies a scoring to each of the headings, and he uses the information from the countries he took data from to score each country and show where they lie within each range. What I want to look at for the purposes of this is individualism and collectivism from a societal point of view. An individualistic culture or society places emphasis on independence and autonomy. Behaviours are dictated by attitudes and preferences. The task comes first and relationships come later. That's important to note. In an individualistic culture, dependence is seen as a weakness. In a collectivist culture, which is seen to be the opposite of individualist in this instance, harmony and a sense of well-being and belonging are important traits within this society. Behaviours are dictated by duty to the group. Relationships come before the task, so we worry about the group before we worry about the task that's going to be carried out. And hierarchy is very important in this culture. It's normal in this culture that people expect to be told what to do, and they treat authority with respect. Manchester United class of '98 might be considered to be a classic example of a collective society or culture. Everyone has loyalty to the cause. The team is everything. It's very clear who's in charge here, and no one questions authority. In this culture, individualist culture, the influence of the behaviours of individuals might compromise the team altogether. It's not clear who's in charge in this culture. It's quite interesting to note that Mr. Hofstede places a direct correlation between individualistic cultures and wealth. So, what determines a culture? Mr. Hofstede says values are amongst the building blocks of culture. I want to have a look at this advert that was supposedly placed in one of the London newspapers in the early 20th century by Ernest Shackleton, world-renowned Arctic explorer. This advert was placed prior to his second expedition to the South Pole. I'm going to read it out. Men wanted for hazardous journey, small wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness, constant danger, safe return doubtful, honour and recognition in case of success. Sounds a bit like my last offshore job, without the recognition and the honour. However, this message is clearly designed to attract a specific type of person suited to a particular task. You might say that this is designed to attract people who might have similar values. In 2016, PIM commissioned a small project to create a set of company values. We didn't go outside the organisation, we didn't go to consultants. We used two of our own employees, Paul Michael and Tyler Stewart. Tyler's gorgeous, isn't he? So this project was carried out over a period of several months. We had workshops, we had feedback forms, we had questionnaires, and it was all taken very seriously. And when I was speaking to the guys after this project had been completed, they made some really interesting observations. What they told us was that through the course of the project, they kept the directors and the employees quite separate. In fact, they carried out interviews with the directors completely separately from the rest of the business. And it was quite clear over the course of the project that both the directors and the employees of the business all had the same values. These are PIM's core values. We want to provide a high quality service. We want to conduct ourselves with integrity and honesty. We focus on our people. We want to be innovative. We want to offer alternatives and be accountable. And we want to respect ourselves and others. Now, what does this mean in terms of those values? Values in this case are characteristics or ideas about which we feel strongly. Our values affect our decisions, our goals. Values make us feel and believe someone or something is worthwhile. In essence, our values and our beliefs are manifested in our attitudes and our behaviours. The behaviours that have emanated from PIM's core values are those of respect. So we respect each other, we treat each other as equals. We want to enable each other to do the right thing, to do our jobs properly. And we want to listen to each other's opinions and respect each other. Now, PIM's a relatively small business, and in a business where we know each other, we socialise with each other, it's relatively easy to nurture a good culture because we've got a personal influence over each other. In a larger organisation, this is sometimes more difficult. You may work in an organisation where you don't know the people that you work with on a regular basis. They may be in a different building. In some cases, they might be in a different country. There's no opportunity while engaging with other people to acknowledge body language. And through emails, which we continuously communicate, it's sometimes easy to get the wrong message. In my experience, in this less personal environment, it's easy to perceive that there's a top-down culture where people don't influence the business so much. So what does this mean in terms of communication of risk? Here's a typical example. We have a failure offshore. What's the general or typical reaction you would expect from this? Offshore, our inspectors are very rarely surprised. They might even claim to have been telling us for some time that this was going to happen. Onshore, there's usually no shortage of information. It might be in different places, but it's all there. So how do we end up with this scenario from management? Sometimes there are surprises that we couldn't predict, but most of the time the information is right there to hand and it's right there in front of us. Does this mean there's a systemic gap somewhere that prevents knowledge getting to the decision makers? Or is there a cultural barrier in place? Is this your perception of your culture or your business? Is this what your colleagues imagine? What behaviours would you expect if this was the case? If your culture doesn't nurture, encourage and reward good behaviours, the visibility of risk might never reach its intended recipient. If the behaviours are creating a subculture where our message is everything is okay, or where we're afraid to tell the truth, then our values are flawed. We might well be wagging our tail like a dog instead of swishing it like a cat. So how can we break down these behavioural barriers? We need to encourage a culture of positive behaviours where good communications and sharing of information is rewarded. When's the last time you said thanks? Or when's the last time someone thanked you? Does your management tell you what information they need? Do they feed back whether it's effective or not? Do you ask? We should be enabling the good behaviours that emerge from a culture of respect. Do you enable people to perform their job properly and allow them the freedom they need to do a good job? Are you sending the right cultural message to your teams, colleagues and managers? And more importantly, are you listening? Thank you.